If you're new to my channel, my name's Christina, and in this week's video, I want to show you the easiest, no experience necessary, throw blanket. I made this in 2 days. I'm going to show you step by step exactly how to recreate this. Let's jump into the video. I used 10 balls of yarn for this project, 5 in each color. Each ball cost me $4.99 times 10 plus 30% off kept it under $40. This type of yarn is machine washable. I used charcoal and marble gray. I used a 16mm crochet hook, and this is by Lion brand Easy Wool. First thing I'm going to do is create a slip knot to create my chain. The start of the chain and the amount of stitches you want to make will determine the width of your project. So I'm going to chain 76 stitches. All I do is grab the crochet hook and pull the working yarn through each loop I create. I want to create an extra large throw blanket. Creating a chain is just going to look exactly like a braid. And once you've created the width size that you want, you can quickly measure it even with a measuring tape. As you can see, this yarn actually has quite a bit of stretch to it. So I've created with 76 stitches because I'm actually using my last stitch, that 76, as my first crochet. This is a single crochet. You'll always start with a loop on your hook. Then you're going to put the hook right through to the next stitch. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to grab the working yarn, pull through once, and you'll have 2 loops on your hook. Grab the working yarn again and pull through both loops. This is a simple single crochet. This is the whole basis to the entire project. Again, you're always going to have a loop on your crochet hook, and what you're doing is you're going into the next loop on your chain. You'll have 2 loops on your crochet hook. Turn your hook, pull the working yarn through. You'll have 2 loops on your crochet hook. Pull the working yarn through with your hook, and again, simple single crochet. And this is just the repeat. So I started with 76 stitches, and what I'm creating is 75 single crochets as my first row of crochet. This is the basis of the entire pattern of the entire project. So again, simple, easy crochet. Start with a loop, pull your crochet hook through your stitch, have 2 loops, pull that working yarn through both, go into the next stitch. Then you'll have 2 loops, pull the working yarn through, you'll have 2 loops on your hook, pull the working yarn through with a remainder of 1. I'm aiming for a 4-foot width and a 6 feet in length, and I'll show you some easy ways that you can calculate this as you go on with your project to get the measurements that you want in the size. As I mentioned, I wanted an extra large size, so I wanted it to be at least 4 feet. You can start with an even or odd number, so however long you want your chain will determine the width of the blanket. Now that I'm getting to my end of my first row of single crochets, always important that that slip stitch is picked up as a stitch, as that will count as a stitch as well. So I'm doing 75 single crochets. When you get to the end of your first row, and this will actually apply to every single row, when you get to this end, you're going to chain 1 at the end of each row. Then you're going to turn your work around and you're going to go into the first stitch. Once you've completed your first row, the second row where you're going to be stitching into is going to look a little bit different. You're actually going to see 2 loops at the top of your row. So really what it looks like is a braid at the top. So as you can see with my fingers, I'm kind of opening up those 2 loops. And that was created from your row of first single crochets. So that's where you're going to be going into to create your second row of single crochets. So again, starting with a loop on your hook, you're going to go into that top bump where there's 2 actual loops, but you are only going to count it as 1. Then you're going to proceed to make that single crochet. As you can see, there's 2 loops there, but you're going to count it as 1 loop. So again, you're going to have 2 actual loops on your hook. Then you're going to grab your working yarn, pull through once. Now you have 2 loops. Grab the working yarn and pull through both. Again, single crochet. So we're on our second row. I'm going to explain why we're doing that chaining 1 at the end of each row, and it will make sense in just a moment. But I'm just showing you the mechanics and the dexterity of how I'm holding my hands as I stitch this along. So I'm going to create 7 rows with each color, 1 with the marble gray and 1 with the charcoal. So again, I'm just showing you what the top of the second row is going to look like. It has a resemblance to a braid. And again, you're calculating that 2 double stitch look as 1. When we get to the end, what's also really important is to make sure that you're picking up that last stitch. If you don't pick it up, it's really easy to miss. If we're not picking it up, the blanket's going to kind of start to stitch a little bit sideways as we create more rows. So again, just really important to pick up this last one. It's a little bit onto the side there. Once you've picked up that last stitch there, then don't forget to make sure that you chain 1 at the end of each row. So I'm going to finish my last 2 single crochets here. And again, if we don't pick it up, and it's so easy to miss that last stitch. So really important that we catch that last one. And I do recommend for anybody as a beginner is to actually count how many single crochets you've done, just as a beginner, so that way you're not missing any stitches. So as you can see, I want to create a nice straight border, so really important to pick up that last single crochet. And now what we're doing is we're chaining 1. Then we'll flip the work around. So we're going to be working from right to left. The reason we're chaining that 1 is to make sure that that side of the blanket stays nice and straight. But we're always going to go into the first stitch as we continue on with our rows. This is a very simple pattern stitch, so it's really easy to follow and you can make such beautiful projects with this. I also want to show a few little simple tricks that I learned just to avoid some very simple mistakes so that you can be very successful on your first project. So again, really important to make sure you're picking up that last single crochet. Once you've completed the single crochet, really important to make sure you don't forget to chain 1 at the end of each row. And again, we're chaining that 1, and what this is going to do is it's going to create a nice straight border when we start to flip our work around. So as we gather more rows, you're going to see that the sides are nice and even, and you're always going to go right into that first stitch, creating the first single crochet. This is an excellent pattern for an absolute beginner who's never done any type of knitting or crocheting. But the nice thing about crocheting is you're only using 1 tool. A simple mistake I made when I first started to do this is I would actually hold my crochet hook the wrong way. And what happens is it's very easy to miss a stitch. So what I recommend to do is to always be holding your crochet hook a little bit away from your next stitch. This way you can see what you've chained on and where you're chaining into for your next stitch. As I mentioned, it's so easy if your crochet hook is leaning towards your stitch that you can miss it. I know, I've done this mistake, and when we start to miss stitches, that means the sides of the blanket are also going to be uneven. So it's really, really easy to do that. So a trick that I do is make sure that I hold my crochet hook away, so a little bit more away from the stitch, so it's angled. This way I can see my next stitch very clearly. Using a super bulky yarn also really helps because it's nice and big, it's easy to see. But as you can see how easy it would be to miss a stitch if your crochet hook is leaning into the direction you're actually working into. So I want to show you quickly how easy it is to add a new ball of yarn. All I do is just tie 2 tiny knots, make sure I've pulled them nice and tight. Working with really bulky yarn, you're not going to see the little knot. It's actually just going to be weaved right into the project and you won't even notice it. I make sure to pull from all 4 sides just to make sure that my knot is nice and tight, and then I cut it as short as I possibly can. Once you start going back into the project, you won't even see it. This is also the beauty about working with super bulky yarn. I'm also going to show you how easy it is to switch out your colors, but you want it so it's nice and even, and it's not starting in the middle of your row. So what I'm going to be doing is creating 7 rows of each color. So once I've completed this last row, I'm going to be on my last double crochet. So I'm now going to add in my next color. So I have the 2 loops on my hook. What I'm going to do is fold the new color so that way I have a little bit of a tail. Then I'm going to put it on the hook and I'm going to just loop it through the 2 grays. So I'm actually finishing my last double crochet with the new color. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the working yarn of the new color and I'm going to make my chain 1 that I do at the end of each row. So what I'm going to need to do now is cut off the gray color. So I now have 2 tails, 1 in each color. Once I've done that, I'm going to take those 2 tails and then I'm going to take and tie a knot twice, as tight as I can. As we move forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to weave those tails in so they're seamless. I'll show you how I go back to the gray color again, just so you can have a review of that. By doing it this way, it's going to make the transition of color nice and seamless into the pattern. And again, I'm going to make 7 rows of each color. And you can always change how many rows of each color you want. So if you want to make them 5 rows, or if maybe you'd like to make them super wide and make up to 10 rows. It's really all up to you and what you prefer. So again, I'll show you how to weave those in so they're nice and seamless. So I have 7 of the gray, and now I'm just finishing up for my 7th row of the black. Again, you can change the order of how many rows of each color you want. It's totally up to you. And this particular type of yarn has so many beautiful color selections to choose from. Every single row that you carry with is always just carrying on with 75 single crochets. And again, if you are brand new, it doesn't hurt to count how many crochets you have just to make sure you haven't missed any. So when I'm ready to start a new color, I always have the 2 loops. Now to finish this last crochet, I'm going to add in the gray by folding the end. Then I'm going to pull through the gray, my last 2 black loops. So now I'm going to have a bit of a tail with the gray, and I'm going to need to cut the black, and it's also going to create a tail. So I'll have a gray and a black tail. And then I continue on with using the working yarn in the gray. So I'm going to make that stitch at the very end. So I'm going to chain up 1 there. Now I'm going to take those 2 tails now that I've made the cut and make sure I take it and tie it twice, nice and tight. And again, I'll show you how to weave those in. I broke this project into 2 days, and it took me about 6 hours per day to create this entire blanket. And I wanted to actually size it so that way I could make it so it was about 6 feet in length. So you just keep counting the rows and how many balls of yarn you want to add. So I'm going to be using this actual yarn needle, and you can pick one of these up at a dollar store, or you could even just use a safety pin. It will give you the same effect. So I'm just going to actually go in and out of each stitch as it's aligned where the actual tail is. You don't have to go in a very specific order. You just want to weave it in and out of your stitches, and this is going to make it nice and seamless. You won't even see it. But one little thing I do just to secure it is I actually just tie a little knot by turning it back and then pulling it nice and tight, and then go back to weaving it. And this just helps it so that way it doesn't come out again. Generally, these little tails that I've made, because of the color changes, are only a few inches long. But if yours end up being a little bit longer, you can always shave them down just by cutting them a little bit shorter and then weaving them through. Once I get right down to the end, what I'll do is I'll just cut off that very little tiny bit, and then I will actually stretch it out a little bit, and it will be seamless and you won't even see it's there. And like I mentioned, if you don't have a yarn needle, you could use a safety pin or a paper clip. It will do the same effect as far as being able to weave it through. This blanket pattern, you could add up to 4, even 6 different colors, and you can make your rows as long as you want or as short as you want. The transition of colors is really seamless. Casting off is really easy. So I'm on my last 7th row on the charcoal color. So I'm just going to make my last single crochet. Then I'm going to cut the working yarn off. Now I'm going to have a tail. Then I grab my crochet hook, pull that tail through that last loop, and then I'm going to pull it really tight. Once I'm finished that, then I'm going to go ahead and use that yarn needle, and I'm just going to weave in the tail. And the same applies when we created the chain. There was a small tail with the slip knot. I'll do the same for that as well. This is a super fast, super easy, fun project to create, and I always shop for the yarn when it's on sale, and this way I can make wonderful gifts. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you soon. Until then, take care.